Hi, welcome to my journey. My name is Cherie, and this is my vlog. Um, I've been sitting up here trying to figure out, you know, what probably me and millions of other Americans are trying to figure out, right? We're trying to figure out this gap, right? A lot of us have a gap because, our investments lost money. The government let us down with high inflation and no benefits and higher taxes and no jobs, right? Um, it's really been a drag. And I want to talk about it a little bit. Hold on. Okay, so, when I was younger, I never even doubted the fact that, I was going to make it, right? And also, even if I had did some things that was wrong, right? Because I have, I never doubted the fact that I would have enough time, to make up for the things that I have done wrong. Okay? And I have. Okay? So they were talking about somewhere in the 80s, right? Somewhere in the 80s, they were talking about making the age of retirement beyond 65, right? They were talking about this. Talking about, well, let's do it because, people are living longer, right? All right. So then, how do you account for not having enough jobs, right? Even with Dodge, right? Even with the government jobs, right? The government jobs wasn't supposed to save money, but it was actually supposed to promote the exchange of money, right? Government services was supposed to assist the people, right? Assist them with jobs if something needs to be done, right? Since when did we get so cheap-minded that we're saying, oh, no, let people starve, let people be homeless, let people be uneducated, let people be sick, and then turn around and say our country is great. It's just a matter of time before people are going to say, the country's not great. Oh yeah, you might have some people who benefited from the country being great at one time, but to say that the country's still great, is really a lie, okay? Because we stopped looking out for all of us. Now, there are some people, especially men, I just got to be honest, it's the men out here who are like, this is a prison planet, the fact that they are always going to think of life as being a prison sentence is because, it is stated that man shall work every day of his life. He'll always think of the earth as being a prison planet for him. And this is one of the reasons why I feel like, well, if men are going to feel that way, it seems to me we should either allow some, alien walk-ins or we have to figure out a way to reprogram them, with or without, their consent. All right? Because I have thought over and over and over again, maybe it's me that needs to be reprogrammed. And I'm like, what are you going to be reprogrammed for? Right? Even if they was to say, well, you're a woman and, and you're supposed to be supporting some man. I'm like, no, I'm too old to support some man. I'm going to be 65 this year. And you guys turned around and made it to where, I'm going to be suffering an additional 2 years of being penalized for working. You're going to penalize me. You're going to take back whatever money I get from Social Security, beyond, what, 24,000, right? Up until 24,000 is, $1 for every $2 that I make. Right? And I'm thinking to myself, how dare you? How dare you? Right? My mind is thinking murderous thoughts, right? Killing emperors and killing minions and killing, just killing folks, right? Because to say that you have been contemplating this ever since 1980, that's what AI said. I'm looking through AI, and AI said, oh, no, dear, they have been contemplating raising the age of retirement since 1980. Right? Then, by 1990, right, they start commencing, locking down all of the resources. So, and then by 2000, right, they start bleeding out the competition. So, I'm trying to figure out, who the hell are these people? And why are they getting paid to give bad information to America? Just bad information. You can't just sit up here and say, oh, well, at least we're doing better than other countries around the world. You got to look at your people and see how your people is doing. I promise you, all through the 70s and 80s, these elite people, have been, and they still do, basically believe in the fact that, that they are the man with a plan, and all they need is a little credit and some laborers. Okay? And they still want to believe that that's going to work. They want to believe that that's going to work. Right? But every day they get proven to be wrong. How do they get proven to be wrong? Well, when automation came, right? No need for people answering phones anymore, right? AI, screens everybody, chat, screens everything, right? By the time, chat finishes with them, they may not have the time or need to even talk to a real life person. Okay? Now, with robotics, right, they thought that was all cute and stuff. Yeah, we don't need to pay no receptionist no more. We don't need to pay customer service no more. Okay, so now you don't need to pay receptionist no more. You don't need to pay customer service no more, right? You barely even really need, a representative, right? You barely even need a representative, right? So you cut back on all your reps, right? We all know that, right? Many reps got laid off. Many account managers got laid off. Okay, so what are these people now supposed to do? Right? They was out here saying, well, surely there's some other businesses that we need, your assistance. Surely. Where are you, Shirley? Shirley's not there. Shirley has left the building. Okay? So, now, I've always been like a few $100s short, right, to making ends meet, right? And it always seemed like, well, you could cut back on something. So you cut back on something, and then you cut back on something else, right? Because when you cut back a few $100s, then you start noticing, your services and, your taxes, and your insurances have now went up a couple of $100s. It's like every year they decide that, insurances and taxes, are going to go up a couple of $100 regardless to what the interest rate is. Right? So you're trying to figure out, well, are the services really growing that much to where, every year, they need another $200 from taxpayers? $200 more. Right? Because let's be honest, they're taking about 40% from people who don't have tax shelters. Like, they're not classified as a charitable organization, right? That's why here in the South, there's nothing but the Bible Belts, right? Because all of them don't want to pay 40% taxes, right? I remember when I was growing up, if you made, I think it was like if you made under $1,200 or something like that, you didn't pay no taxes. Well, if you look at the tax table today, if you make $50, you're gonna pay taxes. I'm like, what? What's wrong with, our society where, you're saying you made $50, you better pay some taxes. Okay? And it's like, for the longest, we just sort of just look the other way, and it's just like, wow, even the people who are just making $50 got to pay taxes at the end of the year, right? So I'm watching videos, right, and this one girl, she comes on and she says, she needs an understanding, right? And I'm listening to her, and she's like, YouTube and, social media has allowed her, to be an entrepreneur, right? She said she's only been an entrepreneur for 7 months, right? Before that, the only thing that she was qualified for was a warehouse job. Well, even the warehouse jobs are drying up. Right? And the people who have jobs nowadays, they feel so overworked because they don't want to hire too many people They want to make sure that, they get the maximum out of each employee, the maximum, right? Like Amazon, right? They want, you know, they want you to sort like 1,800, small letters, every hour. Um, Pick, you know, merchandise off of the shelf every 6 seconds, which amounts to somewhere like, 300 to 350 every hour, right? When it comes to being on the dock, they want you to, to stack and wrap, containers, uh, pallets, you know, a minimum of 250 items every hour. So the care of basically employing people so that people have a satisfying life and being able to sleep at night and, and not being busybodies and thieves and stuff like that, well, let's say criminals, you know, it's like they forgot all about that, right? Instead, it was all about the numbers, right? And true enough, I know sometimes even when I'm doing gig work, right? And I'm like, okay, I got me a good, delivery. I made $8, it's 20 minutes, can I make 4 more and at least make $24 an hour? Something like that, But that's my personal goal. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But if these platforms start saying, well, look, you're underproducing, therefore, we're going to shove you to the back of the line. We'll pay somebody even more money, to go a further distance. And it's like, you'll pay somebody more money to go a further distance just because their numbers look better? Make it make sense to me. So, it's really an ego game, is what it's coming down to. And that's basically my point. My point is that, we're not really dealing with, things logically anymore. We're dealing with things, based off of people's egos and on one hand, and then based off of people's emotions on the other hand. Rationality has left the building. I have to go pick up some more training pads for the dog. So I'm going into this dollar store.